This week we'll explore how to do this urban cityscape painting with watercolors. Welcome to my home studio, where I share my passion for watercolor paintings. Today we are going to learn the basics of urban sketching with watercolors. I'll guide you through each step, helping you to capture the light and shadow in an urban setting. We'll explore techniques for creating dynamic composition, loose washes for the buildings, and adding people in the city life. Before we dive in, be sure to hit the subscribe button to become a part of our ever-growing creative community. Now, without further ado, let's get started, everyone. Before I start any kind of painting, this is the first step I usually do is analyzing my reference. I usually think about what are the bigger shapes and what are the secondary and the smaller shapes. And I also think about what are the lightest value, what are the lightest washes I should do, and where are the shadows and where the darkest values are. And this way it simplifies the painting for me, and it kind of acts as a map for me so I can plan my painting before I do something. And sometimes I take references to my Photoshop just to create an impactful composition, because whenever I pick a reference, I'm always thinking how to tell a story. And you can also see there's a figure in the foreground. I also duplicated in the midground, as well as I also added street on top right. So as for the materials, I use Saunders Waterford cold pressed watercolor paper, and for the paints I use Winsor Newton professional grade watercolor paints. I also sped up this video 5 times, so don't think that I'm painting this fast. So the first thing I'm focusing on is the sky, and I use cerulean blue at the bottom of the house, and at the top I'm using cobalt blue in it. So when it comes to colors, I usually don't talk about colors because color sense comes to an artist as they paint more, because everybody sees colors differently. But I will give as much as information I can when I do the color washes. So the first washes is thinking about what's the color of my of the houses which is there. So when I squint my eyes, the first one is kind of like an warmish reddish tone, so I applied that. And for the house which is next to it, I also use a little bit of burnt sienna in it. And for top of the roof, I use a little bit of green on the first house. The second house, I use a burnt amber on it. And you can also see that I also left some white bits here and there because that's a widest part, and it also has a little bit of windows in it. And that's the exact same thing I'm going to be doing for the street signs, as the street lights, as well as the store sign as well. So it has the same color, so I applied for it. So think about the first wash is your lightest wash, and just see your color and just apply it. So don't think about too much about it, and if you can, try to mix different colors with it, and that also gives a little bit of really nice colors in our painting, which kills the monotonous. It doesn't look the same. And I'm focusing on the road, and you can see I use a lot of wet on wet technique. So I usually put a color and I put a darker value on top of it. So now I'm focusing on the awning, and for the awning, and there's also like an umbrella which is at the bottom, and you can see that I left white for that umbrella, because whenever something's light against dark, it gives contrast. So now I'm going to add figures. So for the figures I use cadmium red and a little bit of yellow ochre in it, and for this I'll just put the colors wherever the skin is shown in the reference, and the rest I'll just add it after. This is just to know that where the faces are or where their bodies is. So now I'm going to add a couple of shadows for the roof, which is at the top of the house. And you will see as soon as we add the shadows, things will start appearing, and it will start appearing 3-dimensional. And it is so powerful with watercolors. It's really easy to create that light and shadow pattern. And that's why watercolors is known for starting from a light wash and slowly building up. And that's why they also call it a master medium, because you have to plan your painting and you have to plan your next step. So it's kind of like a chess. So it's kind of like a puzzle. As I said in the beginning, you have to put everything together and slowly build up your values. And for the roof, I was trying to create a texture and ended up being the valley is darker, and if I squint my eyes and if I see the reference, it's lighter, right? But as I said, sometimes whenever I make something darker, because unless I'm going super dark, I'll keep pursuing my painting until I get a good result. So now I'm focusing on the shadows for the other building, and you can see that as soon as we add the darker values, things started appearing, it looks three-dimensional. Even for the shop sign, you could see that I left the lighter value, and as soon as we add the darker value, the street sign started appearing. And this is the main part, the getting the shadows right on this underneath the awning, because that will create really nice contrast between the foreground figures as well as the midground. And as you can see that as soon as I added that shadow underneath the awning, and you can see that there's a little bit of depth started happening in our scene. Again, I won't try to add each individual details and not try to render each and every details in the midground, because as things go in distance, I'll make the details less and lesser. Now I'm adding some first wash for the figures as well, and I'll add the darker value on top of it. So the street pole, which is in front of the awning, if I would have done this painting again, I would have ignored it. But I just kept it, I just like concentrated on the details, and I just left it as it is. And you can see that the white bits I left before for the windows, now I'll add another value on top of it. And you can see that also gives a three-dimensional look for our windows as well. And now I'm focusing on the top of the shop, and there's a little bit of AC which with the windows attached to it. Now let's work on the windows a little bit. And when I started painting in watercolors, when I was doing a lot of cityscape painting, I didn't spend that much time on rendering the windows, and I see a couple of artists, like really good artists, like for example Andrew Waite. When I see his window details, how he added, gives a lot of life to a painting. So that's why I started putting a little bit of more details in my watercolor painting. Again, it is really hard to add windows details like this, like really sharp details in a 9x12 painting. It is really a little bit hard for me, but I did try to take it as a challenge. I tried to render it, and you also need like a really nice pointy brush to get the details and the sharper details. And now let's add the shadows I added on the bottom of the second house kind of like lacked a little bit of value, so I'm going to darken it a little bit like that. And again, I talk about contrast more because that gives a realism. Light against dark, and getting the values of light and shadows gives the realism in a painting. And again, I tell my students always, try, whenever you paint, think that you're painting a lighting and shadows, and that's it. I don't think about I'm doing a painting, I'm thinking about I'm capturing the light and shadows, and which also helps me to simplify the subjects as well. So now I'm going to add some couple of more details on the foreground figure, and everything looks nice, and I feel like I didn't have that much details in the foreground. So I'm going to add the shadows for the foreground figure because the light is coming from the top left, and I want to capture that. And again, I try to push my lighting even further in my painting just to enhance a lot of impact in my painting. And you can see that figure, and there's also another thing I do is like make one figure darker and one figure lighter. And I also try to make figures in not on even numbers, in odd numbers. And I read a book about Andrew Loomis, and he said always make figures in odd numbers than even numbers. So I just took his advice, and I'm adding like odd figures in this painting, and that also creates a really nice contrast as well. And now I'm going to add the shadows, and you will see that as soon as I add the shadows, the figures will be anchored on the ground. And I'm going to add the shadows for the figure in the midground as well, and you can see. And there's also this the shadow of the street wires on the ground, and I tried to add it, and it wasn't successful. I left it as it is. And these are the tertiary details I wait for the end, and even for the store sign. And that's another thing I did early in my days, is just focus on the tertiary details first and not to worry about the washes. So we have to think about the big major shapes, the big washes first. These details are really fun to add, but this is kind of like icing in the cake. It's a process. If you bake the cake properly, then we can add the icing at the top. If the foundation is not good, if the bake cook is not good, the decorations, whatever decorations you put, it doesn't going to look good. And that's an analogy I use with my student as well. Try to capture the washes first, then we can enhance the painting even further. And these are a couple of the darker details I'll add at the end. And you can see that even though I know that in my reference, and even though when I'm looking at it, I know that the values are darker, but I don't put the darker value. I like to slowly layer it up, so I have control over watercolor through my watercolor painting. And that's why a lot of people say that whenever they do watercolors, it goes everywhere, because they don't have control over it. So I want to have control over it, but in order to have a control over it, we have to layer on the washes from the lightest washes as possible and slowly build up our washes. And you can see that even the roads, which is in the midground, as soon as I add this little bit of details, and it also separates the midground, the foreground, as well as the background as well. So this is the one I was talking about, icing in the cake, or the tertiary details, which I keep it till the end. And the reason I added this street light is just to have as a lead-in. So the street light focuses on the house and goes to the awning, and it brings back to the figure in the foreground. So there's kind of like a lead-in to bring us to the painting. And this is how the painting looks like at the end. And usually once I finish the painting, after a day or so, I'll work on it even further by adding the details, as you could see in the final painting in the beginning of the intro. And I also tape my watercolor painting just to get the crisp edges. So now it's your turn. Take my reference or use your own reference and apply the principles and the techniques I have showed today, and let's see what you can come up with. Thank you once again for watching this painting tutorial. Please feel free to share your thoughts on the video in the comment section below. If you have any other watercolor related topics you would like me to cover, reach out to me at watercolorimpressions@gmail.com or leave a comment down below. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and be sure to hit the subscribe button to become a part of our learning community. By subscribing, you'll receive weekly upload notifications and stay updated on our channel, and share with your fellow artists, friends and family. And good luck with your painting, folks.